So, ceasefire or all-out war? While Israel's prime minister headed to UN week in New York, his office was already stating Binyamin Netanyahu had not even begun considering a Franco-American plan for a 21-day truce with Hezbollah. Word of the plan greeted by immediate pushback from hawks within Netanyahu's right-wing cabinet as Israeli jets continue to pound Lebanon as top brass talk up the potential for a ground invasion. Hezbollah and its main backer, Iran, more circumspect. They're still reeling from last week's exploding electronic devices, the killing of top leaders of the militant group, the latest this Thursday. And they would say they would gladly consider an all-in-one U.S. plan to wind up fighting both in Gaza and on Lebanon's border. The question remains, what are Israel's goals going forward? Is it to weaken Hezbollah? Has it restored an aura of regional might, one that first teetered with its inconclusive 2006 war with Hezbollah and then shattered last October 7th when Hamas attacked from Gaza? Can a prime minister who probably faces an inquiry over Gaza when the guns go silent keep up a perpetual state of war? And is Lebanon doomed to forever remain that battleground for all the region's proxy battles? Today in the France 24 debate, when is the time for a truce? Joining us is Gil Mahaley, editor-in-chief of Causeur magazine. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
From Beirut, commentator Rima Tarabeh, past advisor to former Lebanese Prime Ministers Rafik and Saad Hariri. Good to see you. Filippo Dionigi is senior lecturer in international relations at Bristol University. Thank you for being with us from London.
Good evening.
Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. Yeah, diplomacy will wait for the time being. The fighting continuing this Thursday. Another senior Hezbollah commander, the one in charge of drone warfare, killed in the suburbs of Beirut. Strikes continuing elsewhere. And as Israel continues its bombing campaign, the Prime Minister in New York, Shirley Sitbon, has more.
For several hours this Thursday, and as the Israeli army continued to bomb targets in Lebanon and Hezbollah continued to fire rockets at Israel, there were reports of a potential ceasefire. Hours earlier, the U.S. and France had issued this statement calling for a truce. The Israeli Prime Minister, on his way to the United Nations General Assembly, replied by retweeting a statement saying it's all fake news.
Our policy is clear. We are continuing to strike Hezbollah with full force, and we will not stop until we reach all our goals, chief among them, the return of the residents of the north securely to their homes.
The Israeli army issued these images of strikes and released videos showing soldiers training for a ground incursion in Lebanon, vowing to push Hezbollah away from the border. But world powers and experts say such an operation cannot bring a long-term solution.
I think if the idea for the IDF is to then just grab territory and holding it in southern Lebanon, moving or pushing Hezbollah physically up to the Litani River, this is at least something that Israel might be temporarily be able to achieve, but is a situation that the IDF will not be able to maintain for long. So we'll have to eventually withdraw again, and then obviously Hezbollah can move back in.
Bombings in Lebanon struck Beirut, where the head of Hezbollah's drone unit was reportedly killed. Sites were hit all the way to Lebanon's border with Syria, where Israel says weapons are being transferred from Iran. The escalation of violence throughout the week has led many civilians to flee southern Lebanon. Hundreds have been killed. Hezbollah has been firing rockets on Israel's north since October 8th in support of Hamas. Tens of thousands of Israelis have had to flee their hometowns. Hezbollah says it won't stop fighting Israel until the end of the war in Gaza.
In the last minutes, Gil Mahaley, we've had some pushback from the White House against Israel's prime minister, who claimed he hadn't even started to look at this truce plan. The White House spokesperson last minute saying that this Lebanon ceasefire call was, quote, coordinated with Israel.
It's possible, but contrary to the Israeli strategy in Gaza, or the lack of one. About the north, there is a large consensus. Even Yair Golan, which is one of the major opposition leaders, is against ceasefire, and the chief of staff, which is not always in agreement with Netanyahu about Gaza, thinks that it's a mistake to have a ceasefire. So there is a large consensus in Israel that it's a bad idea to stop now. If I can elaborate a little bit, since May 2000, when Israel withdrew from Lebanon, the Israeli-Lebanese strategy is the solution is Lebanese. When there will be one day a Lebanese nation capable of sustaining a nation state and a state with sovereignty, with army, capable of having its own foreign policy and maintaining its frontiers, this will be the solution to the north. How do we get there? We get there by attacking Hezbollah's might, physical, military might, and its legitimacy. By withdrawing from Lebanon, Israel diminished Hezbollah's legitimacy as defender of the Lebanese territory, because no territory, almost all the territory was liberated. In 2005, the movement in Lebanon, in 2006, the war made Hezbollah's situation in Lebanon even more precarious than what they did in Syria. And what is happening since 8th of October is pushing the Lebanese on the one hand and weakening the Hezbollah on the other hand. And maybe in 5, 10, or 30 years, we'll have a long-term stable solution. So now, for the first time since 2006, Israel has the liberty to diminish by force Hezbollah's, both of Hezbollah's.
When you say the liberty, what do you mean?
In 2006, it was an accord with Hezbollah and the other partners. So there was a ceasefire until Hezbollah decided in the 8th of October 2023 to launch a war against Israel. So between 2006 and 2023, Israel didn't have any other option but to live with this huge threat on its safety and security, because there was a ceasefire, and Israel respected the ceasefire. So, except quite a few, very few minor incidents, Israel kept her side of the bargain. Now, Hezbollah made the mistake of opening a war against Israel. He made the decision to start the war, and Israel will not let him decide when to stop the war, leave the table, and cash in on what he thinks he won. So Israel will probably continue to pound Hezbollah as long as it thinks it's profitable in view of this general strategy.
You mean airstrikes. You don't mean a ground offensive.
I mean everything. Everything is on the table.
Do you think there might be a ground offensive?
You know, Israel surprised everyone in the last year. No one thought that Israel could stand a war so long in Gaza. Surprise, surprise. It's still going on in Gaza. The Eid al-Biper in Lebanon also was a big surprise. So let's not expect another version of 82-2006. What I'm saying that Israel can escalate more with the idea of at least making it almost impossible for Hezbollah to use its ground forces against Israel. If Hezbollah
but that only works for a while.
No. If Hezbollah accepts, like it seemed that Hezbollah accepted yesterday, to withdraw behind the Awali or the Litani, it means that his ground forces will have a problem attacking Israel. There is no solution for the moment for the rockets and missiles, but at least one of the two pillars of his power will not be able to attack Israel.
All right, let's review the timeline. First, there was last week's exploding pagers and walkie-talkies. 5 days later, on Monday, Israel launched those massive strikes, killing more than 500 and triggering that mass exodus from South Lebanon. Follow-up strikes have since followed every day. We can see where most of the strikes have been taking place. What you see in red is the part south of the Litani River that, under a UN resolution from 2006, is supposed to be demilitarized, but is not. And there you have showing a little bit how it's really intensified in the south. Rima Tarabay, let me ask you, at this point in time, it's been, first off, we know it's been a bad week militarily for Hezbollah, but there is a moment of national unity in Lebanon, which is rare. And how long can that last?
Yes, there is a unity, and there is not a unity at the same time. In fact, the problem is that today Israel is saying that they are hitting Hezbollah places, but it's not really the case on the ground. Because when they kill one person from the Hezbollah, there is 15 civilians with children and women who are dying at the same time. So this makes Lebanese feels that, in fact, Israel is not really hitting only Hezbollah, they are hitting all Lebanon. So definitely there is this unity going on because they are thinking and they are feeling that Lebanon all over is threatened by Israeli attack. And it's not only Hezbollah. And at the same time, there is a lot of people who doesn't want Hezbollah to be in this kind of war. So some voices have been raised. In Tripoli today, some people, I think yesterday, some people were like putting down pictures of Nasrallah, but still some persons, not the majority. The problem today in Lebanon, it is that we are facing a humanitarian tragedy because there is more than 100,000 people who are without home, and definitely this is not going to give any positive position to the Israelis, because even if people does not like Hezbollah, at the end they are feeling on everyday life that they've been hit by Israelis, and there's no respect to their life, to their daily life, to their children, to their family, to whatever is happening on every day in Lebanon. So if Israel is thinking that by doing this they will have sympathy from the Lebanese people, I think they are completely wrong. And I totally agree with your guest. I don't think that Netanyahu, because I don't like to speak about Israel. I think that we need today to put the point on Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is the guy who is bringing Israel in this kind of war, you know, and it's not just Israel. It's somebody who is trying to go to the end without thinking at all, like a criminal, crazy criminal, trying to destroy whatever he can destroy for
So you're
his
braced
own
for a
purpose.
ground invasion.
So this is also something. Sorry?
So you were braced for a ground invasion.
I think that Netanyahu is ready to do whatever he thinks he needs to do. And since he is definitely winning for now, so why don't he go on ground invasion? Because I think he forget completely how was the bad history of when Israelis were on the ground and when they lost a lot of soldiers. And this is why as well why the Israelis withdraw in 2000. But I don't think that Netanyahu is calculating something like this. I just think that he just wants to hit whatever he can hit, especially in what's at the same time what's happening in Gaza. So he's not even thinking about civilians who are being killed every day. He's not even thinking about the hostages in Gaza. He's just thinking how he can win. So, and which is very weird, because We always thought that perhaps Israel is a democracy in this region, but at the end, it shows with Netanyahu leadership is definitely not a democracy and is definitely being a terrorist government, which is completely crazy in this area.
Filippo Dionigi, before I ask you about Hezbollah's strategy, just a word on whether Israel can already consider this a win and cash in their winnings, or whether they go further and have that risk of, because there are precedents, of Israel getting bogged down in a quagmire in Lebanon, risking that quagmire.
No, I don't think Israel can call this a win. Yes, for sure, the past few days have been very hard for Hezbollah, and this is something that Nasrallah himself has said in his latest speech. It was a blow for Hezbollah security. It has exacerbated its vulnerability, and it continues to be. But it's far from being a result or a victory by any standard. Hezbollah is still launching missiles on Israeli territory, and the capacity to do so demonstrates that its military capacity is still there to represent a threat to Israeli security. So yes, the game is still open.
And in the Financial Times, there was a piece about how the Israelis in 2006 basically hit all their strategic targets, hundreds of them on day one of the war, and ran out of things to sort of target, except for places where people were shooting from. This time is different?
This time they have much better intelligence. We know this since 11 months. They have far greater control of what is happening on the ground. We don't know exactly how that works. Certainly, the technological advantage of Israel is a fact, and is a fact that Hezbollah itself has realized. And that is a case. That is a fact. 2006 was a disaster in terms of intelligence. Israel was targeting objectives that had nothing to do with Hezbollah itself. We know this also because there were actually WikiLeaks cables from the U.S. Embassy, for example, in Beirut, that was complaining that Israel was targeting far too close the U.S. Embassy, for example, on that occasion. So yes, Israel this time seemed to have an intelligence advantage on Hezbollah at this point. But again, this doesn't mean that the war that is fighting now is by any standard, a legitimate war or an act of self-defense in terms of, for what are the standards of the law of wars. Anyway, the amount of suffering that the Lebanese are going through these days, the amount of victims that we are counting, including minors, women, and certainly people that has nothing to do with Hezbollah, is not just collateral damage, as some would like to call it. It's actually part of the broader strategy that Israel has pursued for decades in Lebanon, that is also known as the Dahiyya Doctrine, that is basically trying to create a detachment from the population of Lebanon, or at least the Shia population, by targeting that part of the population, and therefore creating hate towards Hezbollah by creating a sense of responsibility towards Hezbollah for what is happening to them.
Let me ask you about this, Filippo. Let me ask you, it was Wednesday before Hezbollah launched its first long-range missile. And according to a compilation by the CSIS think tank published in that same article, the Hezbollah has anywhere from 60 to 80,000 long-range unguided missiles, between 10 and 50 Scud ballistic missiles. When do they use them?
Well, this is a question that we are, still trying to answer in a satisfactory manner. Hezbollah has so far, for the past 11 months, fought a controlled war, and one that was very much based on what, they're generally known as so-called the rules of engagement of the war between Israel and Hezbollah. That tends to basically establish that if Israel targets a military target, Hezbollah will respond by targeting a military target. That's the kind of logic that so far was applied. until then. Now, recently, with the new attack of Israel against Lebanon and Hezbollah, things have clearly changed in that respect. As Nasrallah himself says, all red lines have been crossed at this point, right? Meaning that the expectation would be that Hezbollah would escalate and use those missiles that you were mentioning, on the basis of the CSIS report that you were saying. In reality, we don't have any tangible evidence of those missiles. I mean, obviously, Hezbollah itself claimed that the existence of those missiles. They claim they are kept in storage underground and so on. And again, the reason why they haven't used them is because they are self-restraining themselves, or perhaps because, again, Israel attacks on Hezbollah have been relatively effective and have managed to, at least in part, diminish the military capacity of Hezbollah itself.
All right, so it could be either one. Gil Mehaly.
Okay, several things. First of all, Hezbollah decided to launch this war 8 October last year. 60 to 80,000 Israelis left their homes and villages, just like the Lebanese did a week ago. The difference is that Israel is taking a better care of its citizens than Lebanon. As for the intelligence penetration, the real reason why Israel has such good intelligence in Lebanon and Iran is because most Iranian and most Lebanese hate Hezbollah, and it's relatively easy to find collaborators among the population, not just for money, for ideological reasons and other forces in the societies that want to see Hezbollah out. This is of course, there's many technological, but these societies are so divided.
And they still have more targets to hit.
I guess they have more targets to hit, and the objective is to move on the United Nations Resolution 1701.
The one from 2006.
Exactly, and if Hezbollah moves from the border, I think Israel will accept.
Well, for more on that, we can now cross to UN headquarters in New York. Ibrahim Pali is the United States' Deputy Special Envoy for Iran. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. In the last hour...
Thanks very much for having me.
In the last hour, the White House stating that those discussions continue for a 21-day ceasefire. They seem to be on life support at this point.
Well, thanks very much. What I'd say is that we're continuing to work with our partners and allies to avoid further escalation in the region. The President, the Secretary, and others have been incredibly clear that this requires all parties to step in, and Iran certainly has a role to play in ensuring that Hezbollah does not further escalate.
Binyamin Netanyahu, while on the plane to New York, said that, he hadn't even looked at the truce proposal yet. The White House in the last hour pushing back on that. Your thoughts on what it's going to take to get to this truce?
I know several senior officials from the White House and the State Department have spoken to the details of this particular proposal, and we're standing with the international community in calling for this 21-day ceasefire. I'll leave it to them to talk about the details of that. What I will say is, from the Iran policy angle, we're very concerned with Iran's continued efforts to fan the flames in the region. And so what we've been doing is working with our partners and allies to call on them to also avoid further escalation. As we've said, it's in nobody's interest to see this escalate further, and Iran needs to step in to make sure that doesn't happen as well.
Just before you joined us, Ibrahim Pali, we were talking about long-range missiles, which Hezbollah has not used so far. There's one theory bouncing around that those missiles are not really for Hezbollah, that they're there as a deterrent against Israel should Israel decide to try to strike Iran directly. Your thoughts, have you seen those reports? Is that credible?
So, I've seen those reports. I'm not going to speak to hypotheticals and can't get into further details on that. But I'm glad you brought up the issue of missiles. And when it comes to Iran, this is one of the main concerns that we have recently is the proliferation of missiles, both to the region, but also to Russia. And this is something that we've been very firm. We've been standing with our partners and allies to make clear to Iran that the proliferation of these type of missiles, ballistic missiles, is in nobody's interest. It threatens stability in the Middle East, and it also threatens stability in Europe.
Is the head of Israel's Air Force in the last minute saying that his country will stop Iran from shipping weapons to Hezbollah? Hasn't that what they've been trying to do already?
Look, we've been working with Israel and other countries in the region to make sure that Iran does not proliferate weapons throughout the region. This is an ongoing issue and ongoing topic and certainly there's more work to be done. But, we have stood very firm in protecting our interests, our people, and protecting Israel's defense. And of course, making sure that Iran does not transfer weapons to, the various terrorist groups in the region is of utmost importance to us all. And so we're here in New York, standing with the international community and saying that loud and clear to Iran.
You're in New York, Abraham Pally. So is Iran's new president. Masoud Pezeshkian most notably met with his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, on Tuesday, hinting at possibilities of reviving talks with the West on sanctions and some of the issues you've just been broaching. At a Wednesday meeting with Iran war veterans, the supreme leader denounced Israel's allies, like the United States, but did not rebuke his own president. He's done so in the past. Ayatollah Khamenei also acknowledging the damage to Hezbollah, but not a damage, he says, that brings it to its knees. Let's take a quick listen.
Hezbollah and Lebanon have sacrificed themselves for Gaza and put themselves forward in the face of these bitter incidents. It's doing jihad for God.
Now, Abraham Pally, those who poured over that speech said, pay attention to what he didn't say. He didn't. This was not fire and brimstone in that speech. They're stating by Khamenei's standards. Are you getting a sense that Iran is willing to talk, willing to compromise?
Look, I think it's important to also look at what was in there, and I think we're very clear-eyed about the threat that Iran continues to pose to the region, the continued support that they provide to Hezbollah, and continued, words that are fanning the flames there as well. So, this is something that we need to call out, and we need to stand with the international community in holding them to account for all of this. When it comes to other issues, we're just not there yet. In terms of diplomacy, this administration has long said that we think that diplomacy is the most sustainable way to address Iran's nuclear program. But for a variety of reasons, including continued escalations by Iran, we're just not in a position to move forward. So President and the Secretary have been very clear that we're absolutely never going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. All options remain on the table, but we'll wait to see where things go, and we'll wait to see if Iran is actually serious about addressing the international community's concerns about its nuclear program.
Abraham Pally, United States Deputy Special Envoy for Iran, thank you for being with us, taking time out from UN Week to join us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Let me get your reaction, Filippo Dionigi, to what you just heard there. Of course, there's something which is, I guess, the 900-pound gorilla in the room, and that is that the United States has an election coming up.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing. But in general, I think this was, a very clear, how can you say, a very clear example of the twisted logic that is behind all of this. Mr. Pally, in several occasions, has said that they have been asking Iran and Hezbollah not to escalate. and then refer to their partner and ally Israel, which is, in fact, the actor that is escalating and is escalating in Lebanon right now, whereas Hezbollah and Iran has been fairly self-restrained, as we saw so far. I'm not saying that we should like what they're doing or they're doing something right or wrong without getting into that. It's just a simple fact that it is Israel that is escalating, and it is Israel that should be asked not to escalate. And given the fact that Israel is the ally of the United States, they have far greater chances to make that happen and to make that diplomatic track to pick up again and be successful than they have just by going to ask this to Hezbollah and Iran, if they really mean to do so.
Can you explain why Iran picked a fight with Israel 45 years ago? What are you talking about? Iran decided 45 years ago, for ideological reasons, that the elimination of Israel is a strategic objective. Ever since they tried to derail the peace with Egypt, they did everything they could with success to derail the peace with the Palestinians.
Right, but that's 45 years ago.
And now Israel is escalating.
Okay, but Gil Miheli, over the last 9 days, it's fact that it's Israel that's been escalating.
9 days. The Hezbollah started the war 8 October. So they can do whatever they want. And as soon as they feel that they are winning, they say, over, ceasefire, you can run after us, it's over. I mean, where are we? It's not a kindergarten. They pushed on the button and they will pay the price. And Iran will pay the price too. This is as simple as that.
Filippo Dionici, your thoughts?
You know, the word price here is the key aspect. What Israel is looking for is not security, is not trying to stabilize the region, is not to achieve that peace and stability that would make the region flourish. It's just looking for a vendetta, the price.
No, I said that since 2000, Israel knows that the solution will come from Lebanon. So the Lebanese society must develop to a nation state with a functioning state, and Israel will help Lebanon by making Hezbollah weaker, so the Lebanese can take care of Hezbollah at one point. And it's not, as the lady said before, so that the Lebanese will like Israel. It's not the objective. The objective is to find a Lebanon that takes its own decision whether or not they are helping Syria, whether or not there is war with Israel. It's who took the decision to wage war on Israel.
Gil Miheli, how much of the decision-making among the chief of staff, among the military brass, is clouded or influenced by the fact that in 2006, Israel's aura of invincibility was pierced by the fact that you had this war that with Hezbollah, where both sides, you could say, came out losers?
It's impossible to say.
But does it cloud the judgment of those generals?
I'm sure it plays a certain role. People want to, to close the account. I don't think it clouds the judgment. Israel waited patiently from 2006 to 2023. It was a huge problem. Israel knows what's happening in Lebanon. 150,000 rockets and missiles. It's a big problem. Israel thought that one of two things. Either there's a political solution in Lebanon and then it will go away, it will disappear, or at the first occasion, the first crisis, Israel will have to take care of it, not finish with it, but at least advance towards weakening Hezbollah. And I think it's quite logical that if the objectives are modest, like just getting Hezbollah away from the border, I think it's something that will be good for Lebanon, it will be good for Israel, and this is what I mean by paying a price. Hezbollah decided to go to war on October 8th. It wasn't the decision of the Lebanese poor people. It wasn't the decision of the Lebanese government. They are suffering because of the decision, because, the first thing about a sovereign country is the monopoly on the use of force. A country that doesn't have the monopoly of the use of force will have to pay a price for that. They're paying the price for that, for their weakness.
Rima Tarabay, what are the chances of a ceasefire at this point?
On what has been said, First, I think that we cannot separate what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Lebanon today. Hezbollah were always clear about their position concerning Gaza and that they will fight Israel against Gaza. And I don't think that there will be peace in the Middle East if we don't have a Palestinian state. And I think that your
So why didn't the government of Lebanon decide? Sorry, no. The government of Lebanon knew what happened in Gaza, and the government of Lebanon didn't decide.
You'll have a chance.
No, I mean, it's...
I listened, no, sorry.
The government of Lebanon did not decide to go to war with Israel.
I'm sorry,
it's a militia.
I cannot listen to you if you don't listen to me. I
Rima
don't think that
Tarabe.
you... yes, but today is Netanyahu who is behaving as a militia. Excuse me, okay?
No,
and as a terrorist.
I'm sorry, no,
and
he's
as
not.
a war crime leader, you know? Yes, this is what he's doing.
No.
This is what Netanyahu is doing today, okay?
No.
And we cannot separate today the Palestinian cause and what's happening today in Lebanon.
Is this
If
the position of the government of Lebanon?
Please, Gil Mihalik.
It's the decision of the Lebanese government. But if there is no Palestinian state, there is no peace in the Middle East. It's impossible. And we are talking if it happens like this, you know. Israel is invading Palestine from many years, from the creation of Palestine. So nobody is talking about this. Nobody is talking about the hate of Israel, of the Palestinian people, of the Palestinian cause. Lebanese people are very, very keen to have a Palestinian state because they know this is what it's linked to the stability of Lebanon and at the same time to the stability of the region and to the stability of all what's happening today. And Hezbollah were always saying, okay, that they will defend the Palestinian cause. Now the Lebanese citizen or the Lebanese government did not want to enter in this war because I think that they don't have the means to enter in this war. But we cannot just say that there is a ceasefire without talking about what's happening in Gaza and the massacre that has been made in Gaza on the population, on the children, on the women. What's happening today? Nobody can stop Netanyahu to do what he's doing. And now we are just talking about a ceasefire.
So,
Mr. Netanyahu wants to have the ceasefire.
Rima Tarabe, actually, the U.S.'s special envoy to the region has been trying to tout a kind of all-inclusive plan, one that would involve ending the fighting both in Gaza and on the border between Lebanon and Israel. So, at this point in time, is that realistic?
I think perhaps it's not realistic because Netanyahu doesn't want this, but I think this is the only deal that can be done for a real peace. It's impossible that war continues in Gaza and Hezbollah will not respond. It's impossible. It's not credible. Hezbollah are in this fight because of what happened in Gaza. If Gaza stops, Hezbollah will stop. But if Gaza continue, it's impossible for Hezbollah to stop, even if they are weakened today. But I don't think that they will stop. But today the problem is not Hezbollah. It is Netanyahu who doesn't want to have a ceasefire.
Amos Hochstein already negotiated the agreement months ago. It was on the table months ago. It was Hezbollah who felt he has the upper hand and said it's out of the question before the end of the hostilities in Gaza. And I can understand that people sympathize with Gaza. But it's a simple political question. There is a state, it's called Lebanon. They have a flag, they have ambassadors. This state did not decide to attack Israel. It's a militia, they have elective personnel, but they don't have the majority. They didn't make the decision.
We don't have,
the Lebanese didn't take the decision to help Assad in his murderous war against Syria. And it didn't bother the Lebanese that Hezbollah was massacring Syrians. They are very much bothered with Gaza, which is very touching, but they didn't give a damn when Hezbollah did the same in Syria. So this indignation, according to the identity of these of those.
First, we don't have a president. We don't have a government. Okay, we don't have a president, we don't have a government, okay? So we don't really have a state today, okay? This is on one hand. I don't think personally that war will lead to anything, because I think after what we've been through for 15 years of civil war, at the end, no one wins. And I don't think that the Israeli can win or the Hezbollah can win. So I deeply believe in peace talks. But today, the fact is that you have people who are fighting on the ground. From one hand, a government, and from one hand, another hand, Hezbollah. The Lebanese government does not exist today, so he would definitely cannot decide if he can enter in war or not. And at the end, I think it's better for countries not to enter in wars if we can have peace talks with our enemies. I think that the way of dealing with people, talking, trying to find solution is the best way anyway for all the population, because when we have war, we know that the first victims are civilian. So I don't agree on war from any sides, but what I'm saying is that the policy of Hezbollah is clear from the beginning. So why are we like amazed that Hezbollah decided to fight against Israel because of Gaza? This is something that they've been always saying. They have a lot of support in all Arab worlds because they are the only people who are supporting the Palestinian cause effectively.
All right, couple of quick questions. First of all, does Binyamin Netanyahu's political survival, before I turn to Filippo Dionigi, let me put it to you, Gil Meili, does Binyamin Netanyahu's political survival hinge on wars continuing, on a forever war?
It plays a major role, and the most disturbing effect of Netanyahu's political survival is the problem of legitimacy. Because let's talk about the Lebanese case. As I said in the beginning of this show, there is a consensus. The chief of staff, one of the heads of the oppositions, they all think it's not the time for ceasefire, and they all think Israel should use force to not to find a solution in the north, but to advance towards a solution in the north. But still, every decision that Netanyahu takes from 2018, you can ask yourself, is it doing this for the better good of the country, or is it doing it in order to get off his personal problems? This is why he shouldn't have been prime minister. This is the argument against him. He can take good decisions, but he's not legitimate. This is the problem. And since Israel is a democracy, he is elected, and there's nothing you can do. Israelis voted, and this is what they got, and this is what we have. And we have to try to divide the things. Say, okay, is there a logic in what Israel is doing in Lebanon? There is a logic. So Netanyahu can take this position, but at the same time, everyone everyone thinks that he's not doing it only because it's a good strategic idea, but because it will help him to survive in power. And this is a problem when you have a prime minister who is indicted.
Filippo Dionigi, what's the tipping point? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? I'm asking because we're running short on time.
No, I think the situation is extremely depressing. I think I just want to pick up on the point that Madame Tarabay was making with regard to the fact that the real issue remains the Palestinian-Israeli solution, the Palestinian-Israeli peace. That's the key to the regional situation. That's when things are going to get sorted. But clearly, the past 12 months have gone exactly in the opposite direction. Israel still relies on what is, what they've been thinking for almost a century at this point. That the use of force is the only way to guarantee for their security, is the best way to guarantee for their security. And yes, Netanyahu has attached to the use of force its political survival at this point. So he has become addicted to it at this point.
But you understand that Israel was attacked when the state was created, that it's had numerous wars with its partners. I'm not going to do the whole history because, again, we're running short.
It was created by the United Nations and attacked by members of the United Nations 6 months later. So
there's a reason for the militarization. Now, how do you get to the demilitarization at this point is the question.
Well, that is the issue, in fact, yes. But certainly, if you keep fighting against your neighbors, and not only your neighbors, that's not going to bring peace, right? What can bring peace is a reasonable and credible political and diplomatic process that will establish a path to security, not only for Israel, but for the rest of the region. That's what is needed. And obviously, bombing Lebanon in this way is not going in that direction.
Israel doesn't have many problems with states. There is peace with Jordan. Jordan took care of its Palestinian problem between 1967 and 1971, exactly what Lebanon failed to do, and this is why we are here today. There is peace with Egypt. Israel have problem today with militias that prosper in the ruins of Arab nation states that failed. This is the problem. The Houthis in Yemen, it's a failed nation state. Syria is a failed nation state. Iraq is a failed nation state. All these Arab republics that failed became places where militias attack Israel, and they are sponsored by Iran.
Filippo Dignoggi, we're out of time, but one last word.
Well, again, Israel has peace agreement with a handful of countries in the region, and yes, that's a step forwards from their perspective, but much more is needed for the region to stabilize properly.
Absolutely.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Filippo Dignoggi in London, Rima Tarabay in Beirut. Thank you so much for joining us, as well as Gil Mahaley. Thanks for being with us here in the France 24 debate.